Wednesday workshop at the Thinker Business Accelerator. Here with faculty member Naomi Alstrom. I'm Jason Todd. And today we're going to talk about asking for help and why people ask for help, don't ask for help, what the benefits and risks are of asking for help. And Naomi, you brought up a great topic, which is how to ask for help, particularly when you're a founder and entrepreneur. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks for doing this today. I'm one who struggles with asking for help. I'm someone who I don't like being a burden. And I think that there's this sense of independence with entrepreneurship where you want to do it yourself. You don't want to be subject to somebody else's stewardship. And so you want to do it yourself. And I think that there's that sense of independence. And I think that sense of independence also halts people from asking for help. Um, and I think I'm someone who really struggles with that because I don't want to be a burden. I'm like, no, this isn't your journey. I decided to do this by myself. It's my own shit. I don't want somebody else to have to help me with this. I signed up for this. It's all mine. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to be a burden. But then you go into like, when you're able to help somebody out, you realize how amazing that feels. And you realize how much you're halting other people in their own personal growth and their own business growth as well, if you're not willing to ask for help and maybe put them in a position to help you.
Yeah, I'm very similar to you. I have this mindset that I'm going to be a burden. And I'm not even certain that the word for me is burden. For me, when being asked for help, I'm ready and willing to give help, but it sits in the back of my mind, am I going to be somehow misused in this? And that used to be a bigger topic. It used to be higher in my mind when I was a bit younger. And now that I'm older, I'm just like, I just accept the nature that I might help and then that person might go rogue. And that's okay. I decided to help. And then I was like, the gift is there. You do with it now what you want, So that's freed me up to help a little bit more without any potential animosity. The asking for help, though, like for me, it's if I ask for help, number one, are you going to leave me high and dry? Am I better off just doing this alone? If I ask you to carry the load and then you drop it, now I might be worse off, it feels. And I think also this might be a hit to pride. Like
Mm-hmm.
I messed this up. Can you help me with this? And maybe a feeling like, are you going to shame me because I messed this up? And so I'd rather hold on to a bit of my pride and not feel that shame, or actually not expose the shame. I already feel the shame.
Yeah.
Now I don't want to
Yeah.
expose it to you
Or
by
have it
asking
be
for help.
hammered in. Yeah.
That's, I think, what it is. The shame's already there. Is it going to be exposed?
Yeah. And I think there's a sense of when it comes to asking for help and someone not following through on something, I think it creates extra work. And the reason being is because in your mind, if you hadn't had the help, you would have been able to mentally prepare for that load. And so you held space for that load. But if someone says they will take that load, you filled that space with something else. You've taken that off your plate mentally and schedule wise, you don't need to put the energy into thinking about it. And so when they drop it, now that you filled that space, you have to go back and backtrack. First of all, deal with the disaster because if there was a time frame involved, fuck, you're just screwed, royally screwed. And then if there's a time frame involved, you have to deal with the stress of, okay, no, oh, everything's going to pot. But then you also have to dig in with that mental preparedness that you don't have. And so you have to do much more mental work to get it done and much more stress work to get it done. And so it creates more work when someone doesn't follow through on something they'd help you with than if you were to just do it yourself in the first place. And I think that's like the risk you take in getting help. But then if you find someone who will help you and it works out as a great team, then what ends up happening is it takes so much less time. Think about an assembly line. You have each person doing their part and it goes so much faster and things can get made and assembled so much quicker because of an assembly line. But if one person's not there, it screws up the entire thing and makes so much more work than if somebody had just done each piece individually. it just messes it all up. So I really feel like there's that huge risk in there. It's a gamble. Asking for help is a gamble. And I think that entrepreneurs with their independence and how much effort and mental load they're already taking on by trying to do something independently, I feel like gambling is just such an exhausting thought, because they could get the help, yeah, and not have to do as much and have a great partnership, or that partner could fall through, and then suddenly this mental load that they're already taking on as being an entrepreneur basically doubles because of that extra disaster-ness. So it's a risk, it's a gamble, and it would just be, it's an exhausting gamble to take. I know that as a hyper independent person, like in my personal life, I've done that in my personal life. And I've been on both sides of it. I've asked for help and I've had the help, and I've been so grateful that I didn't have to do something myself. And I've asked for the help, relied on the help, have it go to pot, and then what am I doing now? And then I've also been like, I will do this myself. And I've also had the doing it myself go to pot and then have to ask for help in the end, because there's certain things that I can't do for myself.
Yeah. I think for founders, there's a tendency to believe that they need to do everything themselves, or that they are good at everything because they have a certain skill set. So let's say you're a baker and you can make an amazing sourdough bread.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody loves your sourdough bread. And because everybody gives you accolades for your sourdough bread, there's a tendency perhaps to not let people down because they're holding you in such high regard. And so if you then say, hey, I don't know how to sell this sourdough bread, can you sell it for me? That sometimes might be a leap because we've become so independent in our society.
Mm-hmm.
I have a shovel. My neighbor has a shovel. The other neighbor has a shovel. There's probably 50 shovels on my block, and not one person has shoveled in the past 5 years. We only need one shovel. And why isn't there one person who has the shovel and there's one person who has the whatever you need for the shovel? So it's like being able to recognize that one person bakes, one person is better at sales, one person is better at finding a venue, one person is better at this, instead of taking the whole load and then not doing anything. I never sell my sourdough at any of the local markets because I don't know what I'm doing with all of the rest of with basically the distribution
Mm-hmm.
of my bread. That's a weird example. I get it, but
no, but it makes sense.
I think just because it's come up, I think in a lot of conversations, I don't know how to do that. Why is it okay? Why is it not okay for you to have one piece and then partner with other people who have the other pieces? And I think it's really because we feel like this tendency that we have to figure it out ourselves.
I have some childhood raising, how I was raised. Something that a dialogue that my parents had repeatedly was just, you got yourself into this. Oh, you're the one who chose this. It was a huge mentality of, it's my shit, not theirs. And if I chose that, oh, you're the one who chose that, Naomi. You're the one who chose that. You got to deal with the consequences. You're the one who chose that. So to me, whenever I choose a path and there's stuff on the path, I'm much less inclined to ask for help, because that dialogue comes back of, I chose this, it's mine now. And so I feel like it would be almost cheating. And I think that was the thing too, is it might have been with schooling or projects or something like that. Like maybe that's what it was. And so maybe there's this sense of, oh my gosh, if I get help, then that means I'm cheating. That means I'm not actually doing it myself. That means that someone's going to come and be like, no, you didn't do it yourself because you had help from someone. So obviously you couldn't do it. And we were right all along and you couldn't do it. Like that. I think there's that sense of, and it could just come down to pride. Like you were talking about ego and shame, and there's no shame in asking for help. But if you've been shamed and asking for help in the past, your internal dialogue, shaming yourself, that's going to come out quite a bit. That's going to come out quite a bit if you can't do it. If you run into a wall and run into a situation where you can't do it. And you don't want, and the last thing you want is, as a child to a parent, obviously a child is entitled to safety and security from a parent, but that doesn't mean they're entitled to all of the parent's time and energy. A parent needs to be giving and sacrificing, of course. That's my job as a mom. That's my job. I moved to a state I never wanted to live in so that my son wouldn't be in the hospital every other month. And guess what? It's worked wonders. I get that. But I think there's that sense of parents are supposed to teach us what we're not entitled to. And if we ingrain into us that we're never entitled to somebody's time, or then if we try to get help later, it might come across, we might not know how to ask for help. Because I think with parents, because we're entitled to them showing up for us, there's that sense of, oh, you're not going to help me. And we don't know how to ask. We know how to let them know that we need help, but we don't necessarily know how to ask. And so I think they're also in the entrepreneur world, when you become independent, when you become an adult, there's a different way to ask for help from people. They're not your parent. They're not somebody who is, you're not in their stewardship. And it then becomes a business exchange, and it then becomes a, will you help me? I need this. And I think that you're good at that. Can we see if this works out? I think there's that sense of maybe not knowing exactly how to ask for that help, now that there's not that, without it being an entitlement. Because I think as kids, we've learned to let our parents know that we need help. But I think learning how to ask for help in a non-entitled way, in a not anticipating that the person will help you, or it means that they hate you and they wish you would fail. Like that, it doesn't have to be either or. And I think that there's a fine line. And I think for me, at least, I struggle to know how to ask for help. I let people know that I'm struggling, but I don't know how to be like, here's what I need, and I don't know how to get that. I don't
I
I don't
agree
know how
with you
to
that
do
it's
that.
laid down from a young age. In my experience with school, students spend most of their formative years when they essentially they're learning the framework for how the world works, because
Mm,
they've not been outside into the quote unquote real world, right?
right.
They're in the safety of teachers and parents and the school environment, and the framework is being impressed upon them. It's being like stamped into them, essentially. This is how things work. And it's really it's really an individualistic environment. The class does not get a grade. The class does not succeed. The
Mm-hmm.
individual succeeds. And there's some value in that, right?
Right.
Competition moves a person forward. However, then you get into the real world and you have to start undoing all this and teaching people how to collaborate, because
That's
they were not
true.
taught how to collaborate at the beginning. You get in the real world and you're like, there's no test that says, oh my gosh, you didn't unload that truck by yourself fast enough, you are fired. Instead, it's, why didn't you ask for help? Because while I was growing up, I couldn't ask for help.
That
I
was
couldn't be
called
like, hey, I'm
cheating.
taking this test. Exactly. It's called cheating. And then of course I take this framework into the rest of my life. And you use this word, when you become an adult, as though it's this delineation line. And the question would be, okay, when is a person an adult?
Mm-hmm.
When they act like an adult? Like, I'm 46. I don't always act like an adult. I act like an adult in some areas of my life, and I feel like I act like an absolute child in some other areas. And it seems that that transition of laying that framework from an individualistic environment into, you can be an individual, but you have to collaborate as well. That's not clear. It's not
No, it's
delineated. It's
not.
not easy. And it's a process of integration of the two, because I think the two are designed to somehow work together. That I can get mine, and you can get yours too. And yet that is a huge chasm to cross for people. I want to be the standout in the organization. Yeah, I want the whole organization to succeed. If you're on commission, I can tell you I don't want that. It's not that I don't want that other person to succeed, but I'm going to take that sale. Okay. How's that work out? Then I can't ask for help on the sale. It's disincentivized sometimes the incentives are not aligned
Mm.
to to encourage people to work together. And that's really what I think it's about. Where's the incentive?
I'm wondering if that's why team sports are such a huge deal and why they're so important, because that does teach that, the extracurriculars, the team sports, that does teach that. I'm wondering if there might be a correlation between statistically success of people in life and their businesses, people who did team things and team sports and competition things, like where you had to be on a team, versus people who just did the school system and just did academia. Like, I'm wondering if there's a statistic somewhere that has, I'm super curious now,
There
because
is.
there is.
There is, and it does exist, and that's one of the reasons that people get so up in arms when school districts start saying, "Hey, we're going to cut sports" or something like that, because the
Ugh.
ability to operate within a team environment from a young age via sports is an indicator of your success later on. In addition, just adding on to that, military people who've been in the military are statistically more successful in certain environments because their ability to work as a team, to put the group goal above the individual goal. And that was, again, like this idea of impressed upon them. That framework was absolutely impressed upon them in the military. And so naturally they know they actually have skills to work with people better than some other folks.
Wow, that's insane. So we're literally trained, and not only is our education system royally effed, but on top of that, it's training us to not have that crowd success mentality. It has that scarcity. Success is for one person. You need to do your best. You need to do it all alone. You can't get help from other people. Oh dear. That now goes into what I need to do, what I need to be teaching my kids. Because if they're not learning certain things at school, what am I needing to be hammering in at home? And that kind of
It's like
goes like,
swimming is an interesting one. My kids swam for a number of years.
mm,
And swimming is one of those things where you're always swimming against your own best time, but it's very difficult to achieve a best time if you're not swimming against somebody else. And in the end, the team wins. You can get a best time, but the team wins. And that I think is it's an interesting way to see looking out for oneself and then needing really help from somebody else. I need you to help push me forward because I can't achieve the best that I can be unless you help me.
mhm.
And then I think on the other side of that is, can we be genuinely excited and supportive of another person who we helped and they achieved beyond what perhaps we perceive ourselves to have achieved. And that's where the comparison thing is that is a trap to get into,
Yeah.
because then also we don't help, we don't ask for help because we are comparing ourselves and we want to be seen as having it together or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too, is Kate, obviously I'm a millennial woman, so I am going to bring Taylor Swift in any conversation I can. There is a sense of, if you look at pictures of her and see performances of her from 10 years ago, even like literally just 10 years ago, she is trying to prove that she belongs. She is trying to prove that she belongs in the industry, that she's good enough, that she deserves a spot here. Look at current performances of her. She's not trying to prove anything to anyone. You can see it in the way she carries herself, in the way she interacts with people, in the way she makes no apologies. There's a switch that has flipped. And I think that there's a sense that as entrepreneurs, we need to get to that point where we stop trying to do certain things ourselves. We stop trying to prove ourselves. Oh, that person could do it themselves. I can do it myself. No, that person had help that they don't talk about. If you watch any celebrity, they have lots of stylists, lots of publicists telling them what they should and shouldn't do, and trying to decide, helping them decide what to say, what not to say, like how to make sure that they don't get canceled, essentially. But thinking that someone does it by themselves is just poppycock. It's not real. It's not real. But because they don't talk about that side of it, that hidden side of it, to us, all we see is the perfect image that we think they created themselves. And so in order for us to feel like we belong and to prove to other people that we belong, is we have to do it ourselves too. And so we're constantly trying to, I belong here, I belong here. We're kicking extra. We're not asking for that help. And we're constantly running out of breath. We're constantly have that worried look on our faces. Is it good enough? Is it good? Are they going to, am I putting up this persona of I belong here because I'm doing enough? Did I put that up enough? Am I proving myself enough? But as an entrepreneur, when you know you belong here, when you get this sense of nobody knows what they're doing, everybody needs help. When you realize that everybody is floundering, everybody, okay? There's not a single person who actually knows that what they're doing is the best possible thing, and don't mess with me because I know better. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know it's exactly right. The people who are like that are narcissistic and they are going to be their own demise. That's how that's going to work. But the people who are genuine, good, honest, kind people, they have no idea what the fuck they're doing. And once you realize that, and once you realize that they are getting help from this person and that person, it doesn't mean they're weak. When you realize who they got help from and how they got help, you don't think they're weak. You recognize that, oh my gosh, when you see people who are assets and ways that people can be assets to you, it benefits, it's a mutual benefiting of the relationship, because how do you feel when someone can find value in what you have to offer? And so it benefits you because you feel validated, and it benefits them because they're receiving an asset they didn't have before. And so it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and it builds that strength. Like, you strengthen yourself because you have a bigger safety net of people who know things that you don't. And then on top of that, you stop worrying about what people are thinking. And I think that's when you realize that no one knows what they're doing, you stop worrying about getting their approval. And when you realize that
go ahead.
When you realize that you have that people can be assets to you, and how much it would validate them to be an asset to you, you realize how mutually beneficial it is, and it's not actually being a burden.
I think one of the things that stands out from what you said to me is that allowing people to help you helps them. It encourages them to grow in their strengths and the better qualities, which I call them better qualities, which really, from a faith-based perspective, let's say the fruits of the spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are the better qualities. Those are the transcendent qualities, useful in all circumstances. Video editing, neat skill to have. Not going to help you with relationships. Love, joy, peace, for sure. And denying help from somebody, I think, hinders their ability it hinders your growth in those better qualities. It hinders their growth in those better qualities. And those qualities are so attractive. In fact, I love your Taylor Swift example, because there is some sort of magical line that people cross when we become super attracted to them, because we know in some mysterious way they don't need our approval. They're just doing what they want to do. And it's so attractive because I think we all deep down want to live that way. We want to believe that we could be that person who somehow is living or attaining this idea of, I'm just going to live my life to the fullest extent that I can live it. And that doesn't mean I'm great at everything. I'm terrible at some things. And when I bring people around me who love those things, one of the things I talked about with entrepreneurs for many years, well, I still do, is stop doing things you hate and are no good at. I always go to, I push to the extreme. The things that you hate and are no good at, stop doing them. It's very simple and clear. If you hate cutting your lawn, let's say you're an entrepreneur. This is the example I use. Years ago, I was running a reasonably sized company, 3 children, wife, house, friends, and I did not have time to cut my lawn. I would start on Friday night, take me 2 hours or something like that, and then I'd finish it up on Saturday because it's going to get dark outside, and then we're going to go in for food, and then I got kids to take care of and that type of stuff. It's just many things a person can do in their life. And I thought, I hate cutting my lawn. Also, not very good at it because I don't take the time to do it. But I want my lawn done well. There's a problem with that. If I hate doing it, I'm not very good at it, and I want it done well, there's a gap. Who can fill in the gap? Somebody who likes to mow a lawn. But the hindrance in my mind was, as soon as I heard my father's voice in my head, and I was like mid-20s probably when I was in this situation. And I heard my father's voice in my head saying, oh, what, you can't mow your own lawn? And so I didn't. I decided not to find somebody to mow my lawn. And I eventually said, why am I living with my father's voice in my head? I've not even had this conversation with my father. Found out it's $35 a week to have somebody mow my lawn. They'd blow it off, they'd trim it and all sorts of stuff in it. And I was like, for $35, I can't eat out on $35. I'm 100% going to have somebody mow my lawn. And so I did. Sure enough, my dad, oh, you can't mow your own lawn. I was like, no, I don't want to. And you shouldn't either. Like, like you're running a successful business and you should have somebody mow your lawn too. You don't like it and you're not good at it. And and it was interesting that we have these voices that we're really actually living for somebody else's approval, making decisions for somebody else's approval, which is hindering our own development, our own joy. We are stopping our own or limiting the benefits that we could have, the life that we could have, because we are unwilling to have somebody else just fill in the gap for something we're no good at and we don't like. That's dumb. And and sometimes it's for that voice in our head that we've not even had a conversation about. And even if we did, who cares? My dad doesn't live at that house. My dad doesn't live my life. And my dad ultimately doesn't care. He really doesn't. He didn't care one little bit. It was just, he grew up in a situation where he had to do everything himself or felt like that at least, which is probably also not true. But the forfeiting, asking for help, forfeit somebody else being able to help. And in that situation, by asking for help, employing somebody else, I helped that person's business. That person eventually became a client. That person eventually sold that business. That person eventually started another business. That guy has moved on, all because there was one time where I got over my own potential disapproval or fear of disapproval to get somebody to mow my lawn. None of that would have occurred had I not been like, hey, Bob, what's it cost to mow a lawn? I seriously think about it that way. I've never thought about it that way except right now. But think about it that way. It's like, we'll term it this way. What sort of blessing are we forfeiting for ourselves and for others because we are unwilling to get over we are seeking approval from someone who doesn't need, in ways that we don't need approval. We're already approved. You're already okay. And like you talk about, we already don't know as much as somebody else doesn't know. Like all of us have lived today for the first time. Who said we should know how to do it?
I think it also goes into like when you have that internal dialogue, when you have that disapproval from somebody else, I feel like it almost becomes our own approval standards. Like for me, and I'm just speaking for myself here, I don't necessarily feel like I need anyone else's approval, but I hold myself to a very high standard and I disapprove of myself a lot. But that has to do with previous interactions I've had with people. And so I've set my standard with previous interactions. So that whole like, oh, you got yourself into this, that's my internal dialogue. I can't approve of myself asking for help because I don't think that's legit. And so then it becomes, whose approval am I trying to get? Because if it's my own, that's one thing. If it's somebody else's, that's another thing. And if it's my own based off of somebody else's, that's also not my own. And I think that's something that I get stuck on quite a bit is I don't need other people's approval, but I need my own approval. And my own approval is a lot of times based off of what I know other people would approve of. And that's still other people's approval.
It's hard to know your own voice.
And
even when you do, I think, know your own voice, it's hard to trust that.
Yeah. And especially if people haven't.
It's an issue of experience, I think. I think there's no magic wand that a person can wave over another person's life and go, and now thou shalt know thy own voice from thy father's. the one nice. But I do think, I think of this idea of concentric circles. The closer we are to ourselves, to something that we really value, the less likely we are to ask for help. The further it is from something that we really value, the more likely we are to ask for help, because when we talk about risks and benefits, the risk, and it's not actually risk, it's the repercussions. What's another word for repercussions? I don't know.
Consequences?
Consequences. Thank you. The consequences. So the risk could be the same. And people get risk and consequences all mixed up. So there is a certain amount of risk for driving your car, right? The consequences of which are, you could get into an accident, you could get at this, you could get at that, right? You could die, right? But the risk is pretty low, right? Consequences have not changed. If it's 20% risk you're going to get in an accident today versus 50% risk because there's fewer or more cars on the road, whatever, consequences are approximately the same, right? So we do it anyhow, but because we need to, right? We forget it all. But if, for instance, I care about something like I'm going to have somebody watch my kids, the consequences of you messing with my kids are enormous. Whereas the consequences of you messing up my lawn are almost nothing.
Yeah.
And the risk, and I don't know how to ascertain that, or how to measure it right now, but the idea of I'm more willing to ask for help in something where the consequences are very low versus where the consequences of something going wrong are very high, or the consequences of you messing with me, messing with my emotions or something like that. I'm much more likely to hold on and push away help from something that's very close to me than I am for something that's very far away.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I'm certain that has something to do with people's ability to ask for help or desire to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of those parents. I don't necessarily feel like I'm the greatest mom, not by a long shot, but I can count on one finger the number of times I have had another person watch my children, asked for a babysitter since in the last 3 years, because the risk factor is too great. And with both children, my oldest, he's always had a speech impediment and couldn't actually always say what things that would happen. And so my youngest, he's starting to be able to talk a bit more, and maybe I can consider it now that if something were to happen, they can use their voice. But as they've been, when they were younger, they don't know, people don't know my kids as well as I do. So what if their needs aren't met? Not that I'm necessarily doing a great job of filling every need, but at least I understand them. At least I know what they're getting if I'm around. And I think that's the hyper independence that comes with entrepreneurship. Like when there's something that is so precious to you, when there's something that has so much of your heart and soul into it, you know that someone, if you invite another person in there, they can fuck it up. They can do some serious damage. And so that risk factor is, if you put someone in a position to cause damage, you run that risk. And then as an entrepreneur, with putting so much of your heart and soul into something, because usually as entrepreneurs, we tend to start up things that we feel passionate about. So every project we do is a heart project. And so how can you put that on the line when so much of your heart is in it? And I think that there's that risk that we take when we do ask for help.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and go to, I think, an old African proverb, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Particularly with the journey of entrepreneurship, the people who are most successful are the people who know how to work well with people, because the entirety of being an entrepreneur is working with other people. Whether you're working with your customers, whether you're working with your team, whether you're working with your vendors, whether you're working with the stakeholders, such as spouses, significant others, children, friends, family. It is the defining characteristic of a successful entrepreneur that they can work well with others, and among other defining characteristics. But example comes to my mind. There's a lady, so years ago, Oprah. Remember Oprah had her favorite things or something like that? These are my favorite things of 2008.
I'm too young for that.
Oh gosh, darn
I
it.
don't remember it.
All right. Well, there was a lady called Oprah.
Oh, I know Oprah. Oh my gosh, I know Oprah. Hell,
She
I
had a
just don't
television
remember the
show.
favorite things segment.
I think she had
Hell.
a once. I think it's. I feel like it was a once a year. I don't know. Anyhow, she had Oprah's favorite bite, and she did Oprah's favorite bite of chocolate. And she records it. She recorded in Chicago, and I'm 90 minutes west of Chicago. And there was a guy in Chicago, or sorry, in my area who owns, in fact, a chocolate shop. And it is really good chocolate. He knows what he's doing. A very well trained individual. Loves his chocolate so much that it is abnormally important to him that other people respect the chocolate like he respects the chocolate. Yeah. So for instance, and this is how far this stuff goes. When the hockey team, when the hockey stuff ends, he is not open. When there's a special event downtown, he is not open because people will come into his store a little toasted and they won't respect the chocolate because they've been drinking. Now, I don't know if it, so anyhow, that's how we'll get back to that in a second. So that's a little bit of framework.
Mm-hmm.
Oprah contacted him. Oprah's producers contacted him and said, "Hey, we want you to be Oprah's favorite bite. This is going to revolutionize this man's life." Just a tiny little chocolate shop. And he said
Didn't
no.
do it. No.
What did she do? She contacted the other chocolate maker in my area, who's a very nice lady who employs a team of other very nice, essentially stay-at-home moms working part-time and now work full-time. They can pick up their kids in the morning, drop them off, right? She's a great business, right? And wants to ask for help. And she said, absolutely, I will be. And it revolutionized her life. Now, he tells it with great pride that he declined Oprah's favorite bite because he wants to make sure the chocolate is so amazing. And she said, I make great chocolate. And she does. I make great chocolate. And she even made this chocolate so you can have a one for every day of the week. So here's your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday bite of chocolate. Great marketing, everything behind it. And it really, I think, was because maybe you got to know the guy a little bit. He does not play well with others. Makes chocolate
Man.
himself. Now operates the entire store by himself.
If that's his goal, then that's more power to him. I guess there's that sense of like domain, and that ownership and domain and total control, I guess, that can be some people need that for security. They need to have total control over their entire domain. And if anything's out of their control, it's hard for them. And so I think when it comes to playing well with others and working well with others, that sense of needing total control over your own domain, that needs to be put on a back burner.
Hmm.
So that's interesting how that, and that also goes down to what people value too. Because for me, I feel like he crippled himself.
He
But
did.
for him, for him though, does he see it that way? Like he takes pride in that. He takes pride in keeping that control over his domain. So to him, he didn't cripple himself. That was him sticking to his standards of not letting this big name person come in, and almost to him, it would be cheapening his product. He kept the integrity of his product that he was dying to keep. And so to him, it wasn't a fail. To him, it wasn't crippling himself because his goal was to keep the integrity of something that he valued. And so to him, it wasn't crippling. But from an entrepreneur perspective of wanting to grow something, yeah, that was crippling himself. But wanting to keep integrity of something and wanting to keep it small and elite, that technically wasn't crippling to him for him. And so I think that there's that aspect too, is when we know, knowing what we want and what we need versus, and being willing to ask for it if we need that help, versus being willing to reject helpful people if we know that what they're offering to help us with is going to, I guess, compromise the integrity of what our goal is. And I think for him, that maybe would have compromised the integrity of his goals and what he wanted and his vision. But for her, the one who did end up being the bite, it didn't compromise her goals. And in fact, it was helping her goals to accept help. So I think there's that other
this way
aspect
too, that if there is something so amazing, let's take it back to this idea of the workshop and the business accelerator here. If you have a product, service, or message you think is going to change the world, you owe it to the world. You've got to be good at sharing that product, service, or message. Otherwise, you do a disservice. So if you really have the most amazing chocolate, why wouldn't you want to make that? Why wouldn't you want to get that out to people? Why wouldn't you want to make it easily accessible? And I'm not saying it's price. There's nuances to that. But why would you hinder your own growth, your own success because of an attitude of, well, you're not going to appreciate it as much as me? Who cares? They're going to appreciate it because they're buying it.
But wouldn't that just show insecurity though?
Right.
Isn't that just showing like if someone doesn't appreciate it, so you're gonna act like somebody who doesn't like your chocolate is somebody who just is unwilling or able to appreciate it?
Right.
There's that sense of, are you just being insecure about what if somebody doesn't like it? What if it's not the best chocolate? What if it's not as good as I make it out to be? And then what if I have to own up to that? And what if I have to be a normal person who doesn't have the best of the best?
What if my vision of myself, if I am myself in front of other people, what if my vision of myself doesn't match everybody else's vision of myself? What then? Now what do I do?
Yeah.
How do I have to retool my life? And that is a scary proposition, which, getting back to this idea of asking for help, I think the reasons people ask for help or don't ask for help is an underlying pattern of self-preservation.
And that could just come down to ego and insecurity. At the same time, though, obviously, I don't know the guy. I don't know if he's an egotistical, insecure person, but just from...
Yes. But
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. But think about that. Self-preservation. If we learned a pattern that we can't ask for help early on because people didn't follow through, people shamed us, that's self-preservation, right? How do I survive? It's a survival mechanism. I preserve my own independence. I preserve my own autonomy. I preserve my own ego. I preserve because I don't ask for help, right? When I really need help, I preserve my identity in front of all of you folks because clearly I have it all together. I preserve my vision that I grew this whole thing. I did it because I never asked for help. And I think in my experience, a lot of why we don't invite people in to our worlds is self-preservation. And self-preservation is a hindrance, I think, to being a good human to other people. And if you really do have a product, service, or message that you believe is going to change the world, it is, I think, incumbent upon us to limit our self-preservation. You are already preserved. You are already okay. And it's your business. You have full domain authority. How much can they really hurt you? You know?
I think the answer then becomes, instead of figuring out how to ask for help, it's what's holding you back. You need to look at what's holding you back from asking for help. And if you know what's holding you back, you need to address that. So if you're worried about X, Y, and Z, you need to learn how you'll respond to X, Y, and Z, so that won't hold you back from asking for help. It's about getting rid of the baggage, not dragging it along with you, and figuring out how to lift it anyway. And I think, I don't know, that kind of went into, okay, if I'm concerned about getting this disapproval, these disapproving voices in my head, what if I then turn to how I would respond to that and how I would approach that if that were to happen? So it's not a fear. It's not that underlying fear anymore. Once the underlying fear is gone, then no matter what happens after I ask for help, I'm already prepared for it. I'm already good for it. I can get rid of those anxieties, and then asking for help, it can come more naturally.
And interestingly, the way through the process of identifying what holds us back, identifying those underlying characteristics, is only done in community with other people. It's only seen when we interact with other people. We don't have to, just alone by ourselves, we don't have to deal with any of that stuff.
Mm-mm.
It never comes up. It's only
true.
seen with other people. So it's all sort of a chicken and egg thing. Where and when do you have the courage? When is it necessary to have the courage, perhaps, in some cases,
Mm.
to allow yourself to dig deep and feel the emotions that might come up around why I don't ask for help. And then and then in concert with another individual, pick that situation apart and say, okay, how I'm not comfortable with the process of this. I'm not comfortable with the outcome of this situation. I know, and I'd like to know why this bothers me so much. Why does it bother me so much to ask for help? Because until you figure that out, you will always that root is not just affecting the ability to ask for help or
It's
accept
going to be
help.
affecting other things too.
It's affecting other things in ways that we don't understand. And there's usually a theme. And it usually goes back to, and in some ways and it always, not in some ways, it always goes back to some framework that we lived in and through that impressed upon us the need to have those safeguards in place. We're coming up at the end of our hour here for the workshop, but the need to have those safeguards in place hinder your ability to grow your company, and the willingness to address those safeguards, particularly as a founder who's owning and starting, running, and growing a privately held company. Your business will go as far as the development of your business will go as far as your own self-development. You are your own worst enemy. You also are your greatest opportunity.
It's a comforting and a terrifying thought. I'm sitting here, oh shit.
I love that. I think it was several years ago when you first joined us here at the Business Accelerator here, you started using the words agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that word. I use it all the time now. That you have agency in these matters.
Mm-hmm.
You experience them in concert with other people and other circumstances, and you're affected by other people. You have agency. You are in the circumstances because you created them. You contributed to them, at least in some part. And if you want to get out of those circumstances, you might need to ask for help, and you have agency in that. It is also dependent on other people, but the two are it's not like it's everybody else and not you. It's at least 80% you and 20% everybody else.
If it's your circumstance, somehow either you allowed something to happen to you or something.
Yeah. Leaders get what they create or they allow.
Mm-hmm.
And you are the leader. Oh,
I hate being a leader. I hate it. Can't. It sucks because I'm like this.
Yeah. Seriously, what a great topic, because it's not only applicable for business, it's applicable for relationships as well.
Yeah.
Every relationship. And so maybe the challenge for anybody who's listening and watching this is think of an area that you are resistant to ask for help in, and ask the 5 whys. You want to get to the root of the problem, you always ask the 5 whys. Why am I resistant to asking for help in this area? Answer that question. Ask it again. Why that then? Why that? Why that? Why that? The 5 whys will generally get you to the root of the problem. And it always, in this case, always has something to do with something internal to you. And when you brought up this idea of when you become an adult, I had a great conversation yesterday with an individual, and I said, maturity is optional.
There's 2 sides to maturity, because there's a side of like how you handle things, and then there's a side of how you behave. And I think you can be less mature around the people that you're safe with.
Yeah. Physical
because
maturity.
They respect your maturity where it's at, but it's also safe to be immature around them.
Yeah. So think of like physical maturity, and we'll end on this. Physical maturity, your body will mature. It's the way it is. It's done. You can mature in a healthy way, or you can mature in an unhealthy way. That's up to you. But your body is going to mature. Mental maturity requires input from other sources. For you to mature mentally, grow, you got to take new stuff in. You don't just mature mentally spinning things around your head.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional maturity, though, is optionally developed. And all these things are
And
optional, right? It's
self-reflective.
optional to mature physically healthy. It's optional to mature mentally. It's
Mm-hmm.
optional to mature emotionally. And the maturity of the emotional maturity is developed by looking inward
Mm-hmm.
and extracting things inward, mental from outside, emotional from inside. And we express and how we express. And that is completely optional and also super difficult because it's scary and nobody wants to do it. But your body's going to age. You're going to be, like we talked about earlier, you've never been this old. This is the first day you've lived today. Tomorrow, same thing. You can live it the same way you live today, or you can live it a little bit better. And that's totally optional. This is the workshop at Thinker Business Accelerator with my colleague and faculty member, Naomi Alstrom. I'm Jason Todd. We're excited that you've joined us on this journey for self-development and also business development. Because if you have a product, service, or message you think is going to change the world, you've got to get great at sharing that product, service, or message. What's the alternative? Keep it all to yourself? Naomi, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, we'll see you.